Thank you for coming tonight. Our topic is cartooning through life with Signe Wilkinson. And Signe, we're so happy to have you with us tonight. Signe was the first female cartoonist to win the Pulitzer Prize for Editorial Cartooning. And she was once named the Pennsylvania State Vegetable Substitute by the former Speaker of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Her many awards include Visionary Woman Award for Moore College of Art and Design, 4 Overseas Press Club Awards, and 2 Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Awards for cartooning. So we are so honored to have you with us tonight and for you to take the time to visit with us at NVN. For those of you who don't know NVN, we're a volunteer organization of seniors living in Northwest Philadelphia. We try to help each other stay active and engaged. We try to support each other to stay in our homes as long as possible. And we currently have over 150 members and a range of activities and services. And tonight is one of our activities. It's brought to you by the Programming Committee. So if you have questions about NVN, please check out our website. And now I'd like to go ahead and invite Signe to give us her presentation. I would ask that we hold questions until the end. That just helps the flow on Zoom. Because otherwise you are going to appear in our recording as a huge face asking a question in the middle of the talk. So we will leave the questions till the end. Thank you so much. Signe, let you go ahead.
Thank you very much, Shalene, and thank you for having me in Northwest Philly. I have to say I'm sitting in the Graduate Hospital area. Kind of nice not to have to travel north, but basically I hate Zoom because I would love to be in the room with you in person. It's a concept that used to work for so many people in so many ways, but having just had crispy Thai chicken, I don't have to brush my teeth before coming up to talk to you. So I hope you'll just feel like we're all together in the same room. Well, I mean, I guess some of the reason you have tuned in is that you already know that I'm a cartoonist. And I'm going to be very brief about how I got to be one because it was pretty accidental. I got out of college with no discernible skills whatsoever, but that fabulous BA in English, and took a whole bunch of part-time jobs, including one at the Westchester Daily Local News as a stringer, which meant that they'd send you out to township supervisor meetings, school board meetings, and the opening of a new store in Kennett Square, another big story I worked on. And it was terrific because it gave a sense of the sort of the bottom layer of American democracy, where people in the neighborhood would volunteer for these thankless jobs to especially now to spend your evenings getting yelled at by your neighbors because you don't have the right things in the curriculum or in your township zoning or whatever. But most of the time it was pretty straightforward. Like the time I was at the Pocopson Township supervisor meeting, and they decided, this was my scoop, that they would lower the blade on their road mower from 20 to 18 inches. I got that before anyone else. I learned a lot about journalism. My very first paper was one that's no longer exists, that was in King of Prussia, Today's Post, I think it was called. And I went to a school board meeting in Radnor and took notes. And this is way before any technology. So I had to call the editor and call my notes in, and he'd write up the story and put it in. And but before I called him, the guy who was the head of the school board gathered all the reporters and said, now, and he looked at me and said, now this isn't for publication tomorrow because we're waiting for the mainline Times to put it out, but we're getting a new superintendent or something like that. So this is way before cell phones. I put 20 cents in the pay phone and called the editor and said, they're getting a new superintendent. Are they allowed to put an embargo on that? And the editor said, no, what are you, crazy? And so it gave me this, this sense of power that, you could say, you could write the story as it came out. But one of my great strokes of fortune was that my editor at the time at the Daily Local News was a person whose works you may have read. His name is Dave Barry. Does anyone know Dave Barry, the humor writer? Yeah, well, you can imagine him as an editor. This was Dave Barry before he was Dave Barry. And it was just, so he was great to work for. There was another woman who was, Dave was a Haverford grad. The other editor was a Swarthmore grad. Everyone came to the office with bare feet. It was, that era. And, so I started doing doodles for them, and they ran them. They had a back page on Fridays. I ran the doodles. The doodles kept getting bigger. Everything's about real estate, and I wanted more real estate on the page, and they gave it to me. I mean, they were crazy. And I started doing cartoons. I could barely draw, but, I got to do a number of cartoons. When Limerick was getting started, I did one on that and some local issues around the town. And eventually I had a little detour. I had a detour to Cyprus, where I was on a peace mission to Cyprus, and 9 months later, war broke out. So we were phenomenally successful. But when I came back, I decided to move into the city and actually learn how to draw. So I enrolled in the Academy of Fine Arts, and my paying job was at the Academy of Natural Sciences, where I helped put out the underground newspaper at the Academy. And I still am a member of the Academy. I love it, but it was really fun to work there. And you got to draw animals. So, any rate, you start drawing, you keep drawing, you get a little bit better, tiny bit better, minuscule amount better. And one day, Tony Auth, who was, of course, the great cartoonist at the Inquirer, called on a Monday morning and said, there's an editor in San Jose, California, who's looking for a cartoonist. I think you should call him. So, of course, my heart was in my throat, but I waited until noon here, so it was 9 a.m. there, and called him up. And he said, well, where can I see your cartoons? And nowhere is really the answer, because I was just, I was doing freelance work at a number of places around Philadelphia, including the Inquirer and the Daily News, spot cartoons and whatnot. But I could say that day and that day alone, well, Rob, do you read the New York Times? And he goes, oh, well, we don't get it until noon here. Again, you have to remember, this is 1981. And so you didn't have, you couldn't just get on your Google and find it. He said, it comes in later today. And I said, well, look on the editorial page. And the New York Times used to have this, they, in their letters column, they used to have little illustrations that were about this big. And I had one that day. So I felt like the stars were aligned, and indeed they were. I got to go, I worked for 3 years in San Jose, and lived in downtown San Jose. Learned a lot because it was the start of the Silicon Valley. Google hadn't started, but Apple Computer had started. Hewlett Packard was there. People from all over were flooding into the valley. And it was so different. I mean, Philadelphia was like coming from Bulgaria or something. It was gray, and you had to be the member of some upper class to have a job in Philadelphia. It was very, the streets. There were no restaurants. You had to go to a club to have dinner. Downtown Philadelphia, I mean, and San Jose was just like open and sunny, and I can remember going shopping on a Sunday, and was like, oh my God, people wore less clothing shopping on a Sunday than we wore on the beach in the middle of July. But had a great time learning about that area and what was going on there. And eventually, several years later, moved the opportunity came up to work at the Daily News. And that's where I spent my career. And the Daily News was just the greatest, a wonderful place. Looked down on, called the dirty news by the people in the building who worked for the Inquirer. But when I got there, the Daily News had 100% of the African-American journalists working at a newspaper in the state of Pennsylvania. And so we had a very mixed, not just racially, but economically. The kids would start as paper boys and work their way up, and soon they worked for the sports department or some other department. It was raucous and wild and really, really a great place to work. So I've been blessed in my career. And I feel like I've accidentally fallen into all these many, many great opportunities. So I've only got 10,000 cartoons, so I don't know how long you want to spend tonight, but I thought I might cut them down to a few. And basically, the reason you're on is you've seen my cartoons. So I thought I would do a little bit about cartooning and how it all got started. So I am going to share my screen and do a little slideshow, and then, pepper me with your questions afterwards. So here we go. There we go. Can everyone see it? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So here we go. Time to start cartoon. A very short history of cartooning, and perhaps it would not pass muster as a doctoral dissertation. It's my own view of this wacky little way of communicating through pictures rather than words. Starting at the very beginning, This is my great 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 grandmother, also an artist. And I guess they had COVID then, because this guy's got a mask on. But does anyone know where the word what was a cartoon? What were the, where did cartooning, what was a cartoon originally? Anyone got a bright idea? We gotta have some art majors in this.
Cartoons are used making tapestries.
Tapestries is one, but the other one was they were, when the great muralists came to make their murals in the Renaissance, they would put up paper with pinpoints in them. They were the first sketches for murals. Let's just say that. Here, for example, is a cartoon by Raphael. This was for one of the Pope's chambers in the Vatican. And what they would do is put that up against the wall with pinpricks and then put chalk through so that there would be a line, and they could know where everything's supposed to go, which is a good thing because this is the end result. And it would be a little bit hard to do that freehand on wet fresco. So that's where the word cartooning comes from. But cartooning as editorial cartooning, one of the first people who really used cartoons for political purposes, as you probably all know, was Martin Luther. And this book, I totally, when it came 5 years ago, when it was the 100th anniversary of him nailing the theses to the Wittenberg Cathedral biography, it was an excellent biography. I'm reading the biography, and then I'm coming to what he did to get his message across. And what he did was use the fairly new invention of the printing press to get his message against the Pope in Rome to his neighbors in southern Germany who couldn't read Latin. They couldn't read German, but they could see the cartoons. And he didn't draw them, but he got some of the great artists in Germany at the time to do the art for him. And this is, if you see on the left, those are his people, the German people, farting in the face of the Pope. So when anybody says, oh, our culture is so mean, we're so nasty to people, we're not the first. This is 500 years old. By the way, one of the reasons that Luther was so against the Pope and the Catholic hierarchy was that the way that Raphael got paid was through taxation on peasants throughout Europe, including those in southern Germany, where Luther lived. And when you say that things are rough visually in the United States or in modern times, this is another woodcut where there are demons on the top, relishing the fact that these Catholic priests and the Pope on the right are being hanged. So there you go. We're gentle in comparison to this. This is another one of the time, and this is debated. It was, I originally put it in because this was the Catholic riposte to Luther, that the devil is playing on a religious figure, and they thought it was supposed to be Luther, but then other people said this was Luther saying this is the devil's playing on Catholic monks. So I cannot vouch for who did it, but it's a great image. And there, so again, it's a cartoon. It gets a message across with no words. Anyone can understand it. Fast forward to the late 1700s. This is James Gilray. Again, a piquant cartoon. This was the Duchess yielding to the Duke's feet. I don't know who the Duchess and the Duke were, but they this was the image that he used. And by this time, this is 200 years later than, not quite 200 years later than Martin Luther's technology. But the way the cartoons were distributed in England at the time was that they were etched, they were printed, and they were sold in bookshops. So you would go and you could buy one of these prints. And I love this image. It's so funny. And the Duchess's little shoe. But it's so good. And this is what happens to great images, is it gets used, pardon me, again and again. And this was, the next one is from a British cartoonist of our era, talking about an American politician. I hope we all get it. And it's even a little nastier than the original. Yeah, Donald, we got your number. Any rate, the original cartoon was so good that it made it to this little women's purse that somebody made about 10 years ago. And that is a little purse that I would love to have. So now we're going to fast forward to the United States. And who knows our first cartoonist? Anyone? American's first cartoonist?
Benjamin Franklin, yet again?
Yeah, Benjamin Franklin, he did it all. I would one of my, like, if I could go back, if I could time travel, I would love to take Benjamin Franklin on a car trip through modern Philadelphia and just hear what he had to say. So much like going fast, for example, looking at women who barely were wearing any clothes. I understand he was a ladies' man, but I don't know what he would have thought about our clothing. I mean, just one thing after another, he'd be so interesting. But at any rate, there we have it, the join or die. And again, the reason this is still iconic is that it says it all without words, really. I mean, that says join or die, but you can see that a snake is not a snake if it's divided into 10 little pieces. It deserves its place in history, both visually and politically. I'm going to fast forward again. Not all cartooning was this, how shall we say it, patriotic or prescient or serious, or even about politics. A cartoonist named Edward William Clay from Britain came to Philadelphia in the late 1820s, and he did a series of cartoons about Philadelphia, making fun of Philadelphians. And these images I got from the library company. And when I say making fun, it wasn't pretty. and he's clearly here making fun of African American woman, not just the fact that, you know, she has weird teeth, but that she's dressing up and she can't even spell. It's the lub letter. So, you know, I included just to remind us that our past was filled with, I mean, our cartooning past is not always high and mighty. It's as mean as the streets around us. But he didn't just pick on African Americans. No, he picked on my people. Here's the Quakers. Life in Philadelphia. Are there two more boring, prissy, unattractive people you've ever seen? Oh, are they having a good time? And this is Quaker courting in Clay's point of view. He has a whole series. I just picked out, I mean, we can't go through them all, but he made fun of, you know, many other people in Philadelphia, mostly not Black people, mostly not Quakers. But since, you know, I think it's good for our historical recollections to see that, you know, what people used to do. They're not they're not any nicer than we are. But the greatest American cartoonist has to be Thomas Nast. And this, he's from the mid 1800s. And by the way, you're looking, going back, this is a wood block. This was cut out of a wood block and then printed on the printing press that you see down on Market Street in the Benjamin Franklin, the little museum area that near Benjamin Franklin's old house. So that was you know, we did the engraving in Britain. This is wood block. This is not. This is a different printing process. And this is when the presses really were invented, so that this is a black and white line drawing and engraving that would go on to the presses along with all the type and everything else. But you could get many, 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 many copies made. So I am pretty jealous of Thomas Nast. I mean, look what he has to work with as a plutocrat. I mean, a fat guy with a vest, a diamond stick pin. He's got striped pants. He's enormously fat. I mean, this is what you want our plutocrats to look like if you're a cartoonist. Instead, this is what I've got to work with. Ugh. He gets his clothes at Gap. It's unfair. Cartoonists should sue him. He's now occasionally wearing a nice, very boring suit, and we barely even see him. And I know he's very physically fit because they all have to be buff. But at any rate, it's a very big disappointment to us cartoonists that they look so trim. But back to Thomas Nast. Nast cartooned before the Civil War, and his big target was this guy Boss Tweed, who was the power broker of immigrant New York, and which of course included a lot of Catholics coming from Southern Europe and Germany. But Nast was a German immigrant, but from the Protestant side, and he didn't want to go. I mean, he knew what happened with the 100 Years' War after Martin Luther in Germany, where 6 million Germans were killed in the wars. He wasn't keen on seeing, and not just Germans, but we didn't have Germany as we now know it, but millions of really poor people were slaughtered. So he didn't want to see that happening in the United States. And he particularly didn't, you'll be surprised to know, like the priest class. He drew this cartoon about the priests coming to corrupt American children. And this cartoon has won him vitriol from the Catholic community in the United States, you'll be surprised to know. New Jersey was going to name a rest stop after Thomas Nast, but Catholics in New Jersey put the nix on that. So he didn't get a toilet named after him, but I think he's fine with that. But it just shows you that the rifts in our country and how religion and politics have continue to roil us to this day, and cartoonists are always in the mix. And if no paper would run that today, I can pretty much guarantee you, because Catholics are no longer just an immigrant group coming to our shores. I mean, we have they're now like the old part of America with new people coming all the time. But Nast, what I love about him was that, I mean, he took on the power brokers, but he took on the Ku Klux Klan and slavery. This is before the Civil War, and this is the White League on the left and the Klan on the right, and they are, essentially shaking their hands over death, worse than slavery. That with the African-American male, husband and wife and their child cowering underneath. He was right out front on what the basic issue was that was leading up to the Civil War. And when Lincoln started to raise an army, he called Thomas Nast his best recruiting sergeant. So I am pretty happy to defend Thomas Nast on the big issue of American history. And this in 1863, I think it was January 1st, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And 20 days later, Nast created this beautiful double-sized piece of artwork for their paper, showing on the left the horrors of slavery, the whippings, the slave auctions, the breaking up of families, and on the right, what he hoped would lie ahead, which is, again, a Black family with the kids going off to school like all other kids go off to school, and in the center, a beautiful portrait of an ideal Black family's life if we had emancipation. So I'm okay with Thomas Nast having some, he's not perfect moments, but and at the very end of his career, he did some cartoons on Reconstruction, which have caricatures of, Black legislators were like white legislators did crazy things. I mean, these are just like 2 or 3 cartoons, but because he did them, the Overseas Press Club, you mentioned that I have 4 Overseas Press Clubs, which are Thomas Nast Awards. they stripped his name from the award. And I mean, now it's the who cares what it's called award. But if I could be in Thomas Nast's shoes when he was doing those cartoons against slavery, I think that's for me, that's what a cartoonist does. But this is fast forward to Pennsylvania. This was, I'm sure you all remember Governor Pennypacker from the early 1900s. Well, cartoonists showed Pennypacker as a parrot and other people as a cat, rubbing against his boots. And Pennypacker was so upset, he passed a law in the state of Pennsylvania saying no one could show could draw an elected official of the state of Pennsylvania as a bird or an animal. So the cartoonist said, okay, well, if that's what you want, here he is here they are as a beer mug, a turnip, a potato head, a tree, a dead tree, and his anti-cartoon bill did not last long after the onslaught. So we'll fast forward a little bit to the 1910s, when women came out of the woodwork to start drawing cartoons for suffrage. This is one by Lou Rogers. It's the suffrage vacuum cleaner, and she's sucking up old fogey notions about suffrage. It was an amazing thing. There were like, a couple dozen women who hadn't really cartooned before in this way during the 1910s until suffrage was declared. They drew cartoons, many cartoons, and this one is takes a different tact. It's mothers, it's women as mothers. Give mother the vote. We need it. The children. Votes for our mothers, our food, our homes, our health, our schools, our play, our work, our votes. And Rosie O'Neill, I love this story because Rosie O'Neill anyone know who she was, what she created? She created the Cupid doll, which was fabulously successful doll of the early 1900s. She was the richest woman in America, self-made woman in America. And she turned her drawing talents to the effort to get out the vote. So I think I'm going to now fast forward from my cartooning mothers to getting started in San Jose. I'm skipping over World War II with just some of the great cartoonists then, and I'm skipping over Watergate with Herb Block and others to getting started in San Jose. And this is I did a lot of cartoons on a lot of subjects, but I did come back frequently to women's issues in my career. This is before I could draw, so cut me a break on on the artwork. But it's whoops, sorry. How do you compare what we do? Look how much heavier my load is than yours. He's making $1 to her 63 cents. Well, it's now up to, I think, 84 cents on the dollar, but I'm still drawing about issues of equality between the sexes. And, but this is in San Jose. I have to say, okay, I have a cartoon page, and I start cartooning, there's just so much you can cartoon about, and I'm gonna, but it's interesting to see how topics just keep going through year after year, decade after decade. This is in California when there was a redistricting plan, a reapportionment plan, Phil Burton's and Don Sebastiani's, and you can tell who's a Democrat and who's a Republican by the way they divide up the state. Well, you know, I'm from Pennsylvania, and these are our congressional districts. You remember that about 5 years ago, we started really trying to redistrict in Pennsylvania. And so this was one of many cartoons I did on our own redistricting. So different places, things work, or show themselves differently. But throughout our country, we have, everyone goes through these times with the sort of the same political issues in front of them. This is, who could possibly understand you better than we can, the Pennsylvania state senator says to the young girl. I've done quite a few cartoons on abortion and the politics around it. I did so many that by 1992, which I'd only been cartooning for about 10 years, I put out a little booklet called Abortion Cartoons on Demand. Can be yours. There, I've got a pile of them. It was not the biggest seller in the history of literature, but at any rate, this is what's the big deal? They've let me in for 20 years. This is when the Union League was discussing whether they could possibly stand to have women in their hallowed halls. I've always put women in, I mean, the difference between me and my colleagues, at least at the beginning, was I would use women as characters and not just men. And I used all kinds of women, and they didn't all have giant tits and beautiful hair and long legs, which was kind of a thing for some of the cartoonists. But most of them were great. I mean, most of my colleagues were great, but there was a bit of caricaturing going on. The other thing is, technologically, we did not have halftones at this time. You had line drawings. It was only line drawings, black or white. So it became, I mean, I always wanted to integrate my cartoons too. And so you see, we have two different races of the women. But I said before that the Daily News was an integrated newsroom, and which is a good thing, because if you have colleagues who are from different backgrounds, they'll let you know what the hell you're doing wrong with just about everything. So a friend of mine, an African-American colleague of mine named David Williams, came up to me one day and said, "Look at my face." I thought, well, yeah, your same ugly face as usual. He goes, "No, look at it. Do I have little black lines on my face?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, then don't put them on faces in your cartoons." And so he made me, I mean, he was right. If you don't like the way you look in I tried to integrate the cartoons to represent people, not to insult them. So I had to work out a different way of creating Black characters and other characters as well. But that's what diversity is all about. Diversity is about being able to be in the same room and hear from different people than just everyone who thinks and looks like you. This was 1992 when Arlen Specter was running for the state Senate or the U.S. Senate, and Lynn Yackel, the blonde woman on the right, was running against him. And I have the women. I forget who the middle woman was. She was a Black congresswoman, I think. Any rate, I don't remember at the moment. But at any rate, the women who were running were talking about issues that affected families and children in particular, as opposed to finances, war, and PACs. And so during that campaign, you may remember in the summer before the election, Arlen Specter's camp started a whispering campaign against Lynn Yackel, saying that because her Presbyterian church in Bryn Mawr, which had invited a radical Palestinian, she was anti-Semitic. And that became a pretty big issue that summer. So we got lots of letters in the paper on it. I hadn't done a cartoon on it, but in the paper, I would do for the letters page, I would just drop in little drawings to break up the text. And this little drawing, which in the paper was about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, was meant to say that Yackel was being tested on her views about Jewish rights and particularly Israel. Well, this cartoon got more hate mail than any of my big cartoons. This was just part of a page of letters castigating me, and it's saying that you can't use the Star of David in a cartoon, that is completely unethical. And we had people in Specter's camp came in and complained to the editor and publisher, got all these papers or all these objections, but that critique was just wrong, because just 3 months before, I went back and happened to be looking through some old tear sheets. I had done this little drawing to go with a letter that was about Palestinians targeting Jews. There was not a peep against this cartoon. And I'm not picking on the Star of David per se, but it is representative of how people see cartoons. If you agree with the cartoon, you can put up with a lot of imagery, of tough imagery. If you disagree, if you feel like you're a target of the cartoon, you can attack the imagery, and that has happened, multiple times over the course of my career. Well, as we know, Arlen Specter, despite my despicable cartoon, became senator again, was reelected. And so 1993, I did this. This is it. This is the year of the woman, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whole women senators. Oh, and by the way, you can see on the one Black woman senator, there was a shading they made that I started putting on so that it was just a light shade. And so I was my friend David would have been happy. So that was 1993, and this was just a couple years ago, 2019, when we're up to 22% of in Congress. So this is the years of the women. And this again, now by now in the 2010s and now 2020s, we have color. Well, for 20 years we've had color, and that makes it much easier to show the differences in skin between or among a variety of different people without using any kind of mechanical shading. So I'm all for progress. This is an old cartoon that was about, you guessed it, abortion rights. This is the original George Bush, and this cartoon has been used repeatedly. And this is a modern one. We must end all abortions. Okay, done. The 50% that get left out of the discussion on abortion are often the ones making the laws. This one was done when Ruth Ginsburg died in 2020. And this is again about technology. The news hit when I was at dinner with my daughter at my daughter's house. It was like 8:30 at night, and she, of course, was being, in her 30s, had her cell phone right there and goes, "Oh my God, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died." And I don't know where you all were, but it hit me so hard because you just knew that the dam was going to break and it was over for liberal people to have representation on the Supreme Court. And so so it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and I'm just clicking through my Rolodex in my brain to try to think what I could do, what image I could use. And I came up with most of this image and just drew a rough sketch, took a picture of it with my cell phone and sent it out, which just shows you the difference in technology over the years that I've cartooned. It was not in color, it was just black and white. And that was a Friday night. And usually our paper, the Inquirer, by this time I was at the Inquirer too, you had to finish the cartoon. Everything was set at Friday afternoon for the Sunday paper. There was no changing it. But for this, we broke open the editorial page. So the next morning, Saturday morning, I drew the cartoon, this cartoon. It's still pretty rough, but drew it, colored it, and got it in by noon. So it was less than 24 hours after I'd heard the news. And the only difference, really big difference, is that I added the Statue of Liberty on the front. I love the Statue of Liberty, my favorite symbol. And all different kinds of women carrying her gavel. This was the last cartoon I did on Donald Trump before I retired. And that's where I'll leave it on from at the end of my regular career. But I just did include I've started doing a couple of the Inquirer maybe once a week. So I did this one. Philadelphia measures wind speed by how fast the trash is blowing. You up there in the leafy green areas of Northwest Philadelphia, you don't have it like this, but I can tell you the streets of downtown Philadelphia are just kind of like this anytime the wind blows. And then I did this one, Woke Philadelphia Wakes Up, with all who defund the police and Krasner, etc., as the broader image of what woke means in Philadelphia, that it's really starting to change with the degree of violence in the city has just gotten people, I mean, totally freaked out. I don't know how it is up there in the Northwest, but it's in many places people are really have had it, totally have just plain had it. And then these are our candidates to fill Jim Kenney's teeny tiny shoes. And this was fun to do because we've got a lot of interesting people running for mayor, and some of them will actually be good mayors. I'm afraid, I think that our current mayor sort of lost interest after he got the soda tax passed for preschool education, which was a terrific thing to do, but you have to keep going as mayor. So that's it. We're all separated now in the United States. We've got the red states, we've got the blue states, and I hope we will stay as the United States. So that's whoops. That's my spiel. I'll take questions. Anybody want to give me a hard time, give me an easy time, ask a question, put it in the chat, or tell Helene and I can't see all of you, so if you raised your hand, I don't know whether you have or not.
No, don't.
Oh, Helene, I can't hear you. Are you?
Yeah, maybe you
Okay.
could end screen share and then maybe we could see everybody on. I might catch more people. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, well, you can use the reactions button or just raise your hand. Does anybody want to ask Signe a question?
Well, Helene, you'll have to tell me because I can only see five
Yeah,
little squares.
will do. We have one question in the comments. It says, who was the Swarthmore grad alongside Dave Barry?
Oh, look, you're really going to just kill me on this one because I can see her, but I don't remember her name just this second. She's still out there in Westchester and terrific.
Look at your audience. No one here is going to follow you. We all live life the same way. It says you mentioned a next project in your retirement. What will that be?
Well, I don't know what my next project is. You got to tell me what I should do. I started getting a little bored, I guess. So that's why and I'm also interested in the mayor's race. So I am going to try out it's like, I'm going to try out one a week or so.
Wonderful.
But, I've got other things going on.
Well, we loved your letter, your column too. That was good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, here's a question. What cartoon won the Pulitzer?
Well, it was it was a series of cartoons. You at the time you submitted 10. Now you submit 12, or I'm sorry, 20, and they were on women's issues, and so it was again the whole Year of the Woman thing. Oh, I know what it was. It was after Anita Hill, and I had done a number on Anita Hill, and apparently I hit it very lucky because there were a bunch of irritable women on the Pulitzer judging board by happenstance. And I guess they liked what they saw. I mean, it's so luck. It's really just amazing. But I'm grateful.
Here's another one. You were and are in the business of being funny and satirical. What do you do on the days you don't feel funny?
I don't know. I don't know. Take a walk. I've started doing watercolors. I took some classes at Fleischer and I'm enjoying that. And I get to babysit grandchildren. Some of you might have to do that occasionally too. And they keep me active and tired.
Yes. Yes. Okay. What was the underground paper at the Academy of Natural Sciences?
Well, there were, anyone know Bob Peck? Are any of you Academy members? Bob's still there.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he was there, and Dennis Wint, who went on to other things and then came back and was head of the Franklin Institute for 16 years. He was there, and we just had a great time. And it was like one sheet of paper with goofy stuff on it, but we thought it was hysterical.
Here's a question. What's your take on climate change? Can cartoons help?
I don't know about that. I mean, I've always done them on the environment. I mean, I feel slightly differently on, I get tired of everybody blaming everything on climate change. I think it's gotten to be like, that's just the way you talk about it. And then it breaks down to no natural gas and et cetera. But the way I see it is like going back to my days at the Daily Local News out in Chester County. I remember, going in, and the developer would come in with a plan for a suburban subdivision, and he'd have the road engineer come in, and the road engineer would say, "Oh, another 30 houses on this cornfield emptying into this 2-lane cow path of a road will make no difference whatsoever in traffic." And they go, okay. And then they would build it. And then a year later, I'd go to the township supervisor meeting, and somebody living in that development would be complaining because mice from the farmer who hadn't developed were in her field and were in her lawn. But what happens with suburban development is that it kills the environment. It's like, it's grass. It's a few, nice trees, but not a forest for the birds to live in or the critters. And the development keeps going out farther and farther from the city, which means more roads. And the only way you can get to those is by cars. And I don't care what you fuel your car with, whether it's electricity or gas. That means using rare earth stuff from, now they're going to go underseas and mine these rare minerals for the batteries in electric cars. Well, that's, it's just the whole way we live is, to me, is a problem. And I guess I would like to do more cartoons about that. I certainly have always cared about it, but I just think it's the expanding population of the earth. We don't talk about it, but every few years we get 1 billion more people.
Yeah.
So as long as, and we want people to live in safe, comfortable places. We want people to have a nice place to raise their children. But if we give everybody 1.5 acres, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let's see. What effect will artificial intelligence have on the career as a cartoonist human being?
Good question. I've only started thinking about this in really the last couple of weeks. My daughters are very, very freaked out by it. And one of them tried to get a GPT or GPS, whatever it is, to do a cartoon in the style of Signe Wilkinson. And the chat box couldn't do it. So I'm still safe for another week and a half.
That's a triumph.
But it's, I'm trying to get up to speed on it, but I think it's, it raises such interesting questions about the origin of life. I mean, did God have a chat box that he used and got this started, this universe started? Who knows? It's so interesting. And Ellen Deacon's on this, and she knows that last Sunday we got a message in meeting about this exact thing. And I have nothing original to say. I would like to hear what all of you think, because you probably have thought about it much more than I have. As I said, I'm just tuning in, but it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I don't really want to be run by a machine.
Well, that's a segue to our last question, Signe, then we'll let you go. And that is, how, if at all, has thy Quakerism influenced thy cartooning?
I would say, well, I guess drawing is a quiet, nonverbal way of tuning into things. But I do have to say it's sort of like, when you get a really good idea and it comes to you just like that, I think that would be the sense of how people come to have a message in meeting and feel like it's strong enough that they want to share it. And for me, and that image is that message.
That's a really nice way to describe it.
I would say is a little bit analogous.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody I know I have 1 or 2 more. A friend of mine printed these up. They're a tote bag with an image on it that says "End all abortions," with the guy in his chastity belt. So if anyone wants to send a great big fat check to Planned Parenthood, I will send you one of these. And an interesting story, I was going into Planned Parenthood in Philadelphia to drop one of these off and stopped to chat with the 2 guys out front who were trying to dissuade people from going in. And so we got chatting and blah, blah, blah. And we're talking about, how we both see things. And I said, well, here, look, I'll give you one of these. And they looked at it and they said, oh, look, so you want to end all abortions too? And I said, yes, in fact, I do. I don't think they're a great thing to have to go through. And it's not really good for anyone, but I mean, it is good for well, I'll just re-spool that. But yeah, why wouldn't it be better if we didn't have to have abortions? And then I said, but look, how about you guys pitching in? And they went, oh, yeah. And they took one and they said, I'm going to go we'll show this to our people. And so, yeah, you got to stop and talk to people.
Yeah, you had a moment. That's really good. Well,
Okay,
this has been a wonderful moment for us. We really can't thank you enough. I'm starting to see in the chat people expressing gratitude. Let's take a minute to just have some applause, some thank you for Signe. We're very grateful. Thank you. And this truly is not like a live event, so I'm sorry for that we can't truly express how enjoyable this was.
It's great. Thank you.
Someone asked me how we can get the recording. Within a day or two, this will go on to YouTube. It will be, if you Google NVN YouTube, you should get our collection of presentations, and this one will be among them. So if anybody has trouble, you can write to me, helene.hilger@gmail.com, or anyone else you know in NVN, and we can make sure you can access.